Let me share my screen with you.
Okay.
Here. Can you see my screen? See
I
the
can. That looks awesome.
okay. All right. Oops. How do you go to? It's working.
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
So, how you guys doing? My name is Dr. Kenneth Furlough, and I'm here to not only introduce myself, but also let you guys know about the process of medical school, being an orthopedic surgeon, and also understanding that life is a process. And then lastly, giving like a little shout out or plug as far as our programming on November 4th at University Health to ultimately introduce you to the field of orthopedic surgery. Okay. So, my life. So, up to the upper left corner, this community is called Rosens in the South Side of Chicago. This is where I'm from. It's a community where there's a lot of underprivileged situations that happen. There are a lot of rich history, but yet full of a community that's full of people who just really trying to find a way. And I believe that I am a product of that environment because one, my family grew up there. We are all there, and then the lessons that I learned growing up in that community definitely prepared me to where I'm at today. So as I was growing up in that community, I actually went to school outside of my community because unfortunately a lot of the schools that was in my area wasn't really high performing. And so my parents made a lot of extreme sacrifices to get me to the school I wanted to get into. So St. Thomas the Apostle is a private school, a Catholic school in South Side Chicago, which is about 5 to 10 minutes where Barack Obama, the former president, lived. And at that time, it was a very multicultural community. I got exposed to a different aspect of the South Side, and it was definitely a enriching environment. Um, this little transition between St. Thomas the Apostle and also Brother Rice is an electric boat. And ultimately, I was in eighth grade at the time, and my father, he worked nights. He was a steel worker, he was a carpenter, he did a lot of things with his hands. And on this particular night or morning, he worked nights. He told me to come straight home after school. Now, at this time, I was in eighth grade. I used to always go over to my friend's house to visit and spend time with him, play basketball, do sports. But on this particular day, my father told me to come straight home. So I came straight home. And when I came home, I took the train home and I noticed that my father's truck was parked on the opposite side of the street, which is odd because why would he park on the opposite side of the street? So as I walked to my front door, the door was open. As I entered my home, I noticed that my father was lying between the living room sofa or couch and the living room table. And at that time, I screamed his name, no response. At that time, I called my mom, called the paramedics, called the police. And a week later, we had my father's funeral. At that time, he was 38 years old. And so uh, it was that was a very transformational experience for me because I was a few weeks away from graduating from eighth grade. I'm about to start high school and having to, one moment talk to your father in the morning, but next moment ended up burying him was a huge traumatic experience. And I kind of used that to sort of frame and also develop myself in a way where things just didn't stop. My father was the end all be all for both sides of my family, whether it be my mom's side of the family, also my father's side of the family. And my father had siblings, all of whom who were going through pretty significant changes in their lives in adverse situations. And so they saw my father as the answer, as the protector, as the provider for my family. And I sort of took that cross and bared it and realized and understood that my success through high school will hopefully be a beacon of hope, a signal that my father's still here, his spirit is still here, and I will hopefully continue to move on. And so that lightning bolt was just my experience. And you can imagine me experiencing it as a son is one thing, but ultimately, making that phone call to my mom and saying that her husband is no longer here was I can only speak from her end that it was truly transformational and also extremely hard. And so I wanted to make sure that once I got into high school, that I excelled in all realms, whether it be athletically, on the field of play, playing football, basketball, and running track, and also academically as well. So I still have to say I did extremely well in high school. I was a part of different honor societies. I was pretty good in athletics, which definitely prepared me and also propelled me to get recruited to play football. So at that time, I was being recruited from several schools in high school, and I had the opportunity to either go to Penn State University or Georgetown. And so for those who are interested in sports, you do your visits. And at that time, I did like a little senior camp at Penn State the summer before my senior year, and football, Georgetown came to my campus around December. And I had an official visit there at Georgetown University, which is in DC, and I loved it. I loved the campus. I loved the community. I loved the people. And it was a place where I wasn't a small fish in a big pond. I was in a pond that was suitable for my development. And ultimately, it was an area where it was totally different than the South Side of Chicago. You know, I had friends whose families were come from either princes and princesses or dignitaries. I had one of my teammates whose actually grandfather was the founder of Kohl's, the department store. So it was a total different sort of community, a total different dynamic than what I was exposed to growing up. But at that time, you know, you get your biggest chance to ultimately grow and mature and advance your life when you are in uncomfortable situations. And so that discomfort allowed me to grow in ways I never thought was possible. Also, during my undergraduate tenure, I was a pre-med student, which was extremely difficult. You know, when you play sports in college, yes, you guys may see the whole Saturday games and you guys may see things broadcasted. What you don't see is the days and hours spent, you know, in the library studying, the days and hours spent studying, all of a sudden, you know, staying up 24 hours and going to the practice field to perform. And so that's not what's talked about. And ultimately, the sport that I saw was the grace that I have in high school became a job, to be quite frankly with you. Sports in college is a job. You know, despite the glitz and glamour of it, it comes with a huge sacrifice. It sacrificed my time with my family because, you know, every time after my freshman, sophomore, junior years in college, that summer, I didn't go home. I stayed on campus. I took summer classes. I had football workouts. So it was a huge social, financial sacrifice for me, but it was a sacrifice that I will continue to do and redo if I had the opportunity. I wouldn't change anything. Did I struggle academically? Yes. It was I didn't have the most stellar grades, and as a matter of fact, you know, me being a pre-med student and playing football, it was things got really difficult. There were times where I had this one academic counselor who basically called my mother and was like, you know, I don't think Ken is going to make it out of Georgetown in 4 years. He may have to take an extra year because, you know, playing football and having that pre-medical curriculum was hard to balance. And my mom called me and she said, talk to, you know, your counselor. And she's saying how, you know, you may not make it through and it's hard to balance a pre-medical curriculum. It hasn't been done before. My mom told me, boy, you better finish. And so with that being said, I knew what she meant. You know, she understood the sacrifice, the love that I have for not only the game of football, but also the game of life, and to making sure that despite any challenge or anything that I may experience, that I can continue to persevere and see it through. And that's exactly what I did. I finished my pre-medical curriculum. I graduated within 4 years. And life continued to get better, you know? And so after I graduated, actually a funny story. When you graduate from Georgetown, they have this big festival the night before graduation. It's at Union Station in DC. And all my friends, we all went partying, or all my families, and everyone in my family in Chicago took a coach bus and they drove from Chicago to DC to see me graduate. And at that time, I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. So it was a huge honor, and everybody came. And so I got back to my apartment that I was living on campus around like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And one of my friends was like, yo, let's go to IHOP, because we were hungry. So we went to IHOP, and we got to IHOP around like, you know, we didn't leave IHOP until about 6 o'clock in the morning. And, you know, commencement starts on Saturday morning. So I told myself I'm going to take like an hour and a half nap, put my graduation gear on, and head to the front gates for graduation. Graduation started at 10 a.m. I did not wake up until 11 a.m. on Saturday.
Did you miss your graduation?
Listen, so I woke up, I had a white t-shirt, I put my white t-shirt on, I put on some slacks, threw some shoes on, and I ran out the front door of my apartment to the front gates of the university where they were already calling out names. And there are thousands of people sitting down, cheering and watching, the graduates walk across the stage. So now I'm like, okay, what? My last name begins with an F, and they are on letter H. So I'm like, oh my God, I missed it. I missed the only time, of all the times I could be late for something, I would choose my graduation day to be late for my college graduation. And so I woke up with like 50 missed calls, whole bunch of voicemails, whole bunch of text messages. And the only thing that woke me up was that my bedroom window was near my bed. So when the sun was out, I'm like, wait a minute, this is like for it to be this early, the sun should be out this bright, So like I knew something was up. And so yes, I say all I had to say. It was very traumatic, but I was still able to walk across the stage. Luckily, being an athlete on campus, all the security personnel knew me. And so once they saw me, they just directed me to the front. They gave me like my little name card, and then I was able to walk across the stage. So it was
congratulations. And you did it in 4 years, even though
yes. It was a huge blessing. And shout out to the security guards that let your brother through. So it was really so after graduation, I was not your typical medical student. I was definitely had a different story by all means. That's why this is highlighted in gold. So after I graduated, I was a mentor for the Chicago public school system, where we basically mentored high school students on basically just taking things day by day and making sure that the lessons and the support that they had outside of their home would help them get through high school tenure. These students came from single parent households. These students came from pretty dire circumstances, and understanding my situation, understanding the situation of my father, understanding the situation of me having cousins who had similar circumstances, it was an opportunity for me to connect with them. Because I understood that my mom would always tell me, my father always told me, as high as you climb, make sure you pull as well. And what I mean by that, as you continue to go on this ladder of life, that you bring people up with you, right? And so that's been my MO, that's been my prerogative, that's been my purpose, even as a little kid. My father, when he had his own sort of company and doing, work for people's homes, I had cousins who were incarcerated. And unfortunately, once you get incarcerated, you can't get a job, And so my father would basically hire people from off the street and bring them on as an apprentice. And so me seeing that at a young age was something that was extremely valuable to me, that I feel as though was played a huge role in my overall just perception of just opportunities for people and people deserving of second chances. And if we don't provide second chances, then, it's those also have pretty significant consequences, not only for themselves, but also for the community at large. And so being a mentor was extremely beneficial and for myself. And then as I was, being a mentor for CPS, I was involved in the nonprofit sector. And so I always knew about that I wanted to go into medicine. I wanted to be involved with something with my hands. And so I realized that when it comes to people who have very, significant sort of upbringings and kind of come from families who have hard times, health and well-being are centered around three things. One is financial health. The second thing is your career development. And the last thing is your physical and psychological health. And I felt as though those three pillars basically create the foundation of life and also the foundation of families. So you can imagine if someone comes from an underprivileged or under-resourced community or under-resourced household, there's already a financial deficit. Potentially, it's also already a career development or educational deficit. So we need a healthcare system that really treats people holistically. We need something where someone is not only treated with their physical health, but also their financial health and their career development health, and having a healthcare system that ultimately is developed that will treat them holistically. I feel as though something that we need in our communities. And so I started this foundation called the Intangibles of Life Foundation. We basically taught high school students the importance of financial literacy and career development, how that impacts the overall quality of life and well-being. And it's been a huge success. Back in 2015, we gave about $10,000 in scholarships to 3 young ladies. who have now graduated from college and doing great things. And during that time, I also did cardiology research at University of Chicago, dissecting hearts. And then also had the opportunity to be a high school football coach, which is a huge coming of age moment, because I realized that my coach always said, you can't teach talent. You can't teach talent. And I never understood that, because thankfully, I've always been an athlete my whole life. My parents were athletes. And so things came fairly easy to me. But being a high school football coach is extremely humbling. There's some things you can't really teach, right? I mean, you can, a kid who has that hunger, who has that drive can really, take it to the next level. But ultimately, it taught me patience, right? It taught me communication, and which is something I didn't really have prior to this coaching experience. My mom came to all the football games that I coached, and she was just as loud, me being a coach, as when I was playing. And having the opportunity to coach kids, to be a mentor, and also in certain circumstances, and also a father figure, even though I was extremely young, was a huge opportunity for me to understand, have this full circle moment. Because just months ago, prior to me being a coach, I was a player myself on the football field. And so having the opportunity to really educate and develop individualized educational programs, IEPs for these kids, was definitely helpful and a huge learning experience. And, so then I basically got into medical school about 2 years and some change after I graduated from college. And at that time, it was great, but also extremely challenging. Medical school is a place where you find out who you are. Yes, the material is hard and things can get pretty challenging, but, you got to understand, I went to medical school in Chicago, or in the greater suburbs of Chicago. And I had the opportunity to go home and check up on family. But the funny part about it is that once I got into medical school, my family already assumed I was a doctor. So they called me for any sort of ailments, any knee pain, back pain, my blood pressure is high, my diabetes is not going on. Like, it was like a week into medical school, my family already calling about what's hurting on them. And so it was a great opportunity, but also let me understand how the life of my father and that legacy I wanted to carry on, and as he was doing it with people's homes, now I do it with someone's body and putting them back together. And so it was a great opportunity and I loved it. But there was adversity in medical school. There was this thing called imposter syndrome, where I felt as though I didn't belong, quite frankly. I felt as though I was ill prepared, because majority, if not all of my colleagues or my fellow medical students, they all came from families who had quote unquote extreme privilege, or who had different types of opportunities that I had. And it allowed me to, it kind of got me in a little sort of mental sort of anguish. But then I had to realize and understand that the community that I come from, the parents that I had, the support that I had, the hope that came from my family for me to continue forward, was all that I needed. We get to this aspect in life where we sort of compare ourselves to other people, and we think that, man, if I had that, I would be so much better. But when ultimately you have all this you need to get to where you're trying to go. And if there's ever one thing I want you guys to take away from this conversation, is that you are equipped and you are enough. You are fully equipped to be where you want in life. The only thing is you have to make a decision. And once you make that decision, and once you are convinced that you have all that you need and you are enough, nothing can stop you. And that's what I learned from this. That's what allowed me to, go through medical school and continue to persevere, and to see it through. And so now currently, this little green arrow, this is me. Actually 2 months ago, we had a spinal fusion where we basically dissected to the patient's back and the spine. We put rods and screws in a patient's back to make the back straight again. And so that's me closing the patient's skin on their back. And then ultimately, the full circle moment is the skills that I learned throughout my life, I hope to take back to my community and improve the standard of living of people in my community, and to be a doctor in that sort of space. So that's my process. That's my story. And it's continued to unfold to this day. So I say what I have to say, one, that you are enough, and two, that you have all that you need at this current time in your life to get to where you're trying to go. Okay.
And I mean, I
So
think that's such an important message for students because I think too frequently students hear from people who say they're not enough, right? Who
yeah.
say they're not good enough. Um,
Mhm.
and that can be really difficult. And so to sort of find that motivation within them requires people like you to sort of help them believe in themselves because too often they might have stopped believing in themselves.
Exactly. Somebody got to shine that flashlight because we there's so many rooms to our life that once that room is lit, you realize, oh, I can go there. Yes, that room exists. Yes, that room does exist. So especially like you, Miss Beth, we all have a role of making sure that that light is flickered on, so these kids and all of us can see that there are a lot more to us. And once those rooms become bright and we can see it, we can fill it up with something that's purposeful. So I really do believe that, and thank you for that, adding that. And so now, what are my life goals? Yes, I'm a doctor. Yes, I'm a surgeon. I can do surgical things, but I feel as though my life is there's a lot more to it than that, and I have a lot more goals, in relation to that. And so there are three important things I would love to do before I transition from this earth. One thing is I want to maintain my connection with sports. I think one of my biggest goals is being the owner of a sports franchise where, because me being an athlete, I realized that, professional athletes have a huge not burden, but a huge price to pay. Because one, if I was a professional athlete, I would most likely be taking care of hundreds of people financially. That's what it is for a lot of athletes who come from, very significant or harsh circumstances growing up. You take care of your whole family. And I feel as though to be an owner of a team and having that knowledge, that life experience, I would love to create like an organization where we can take care of athletes and their overall mental health and overall psychological well-being. I think that's something that's not really talked about and it gets overlooked within a professional space. So I would definitely be love within that and also be involved with an ownership of that. I think that would be a huge possibility because, when I was growing up, it was always about who you want to play for. Like when I was playing football in college, some of my family members would say, you trying to go to the league, you trying to do that third. But then I realized, like, why is it that we limit ourselves to just playing for someone else's team? I just never understood that. When it comes to making an impact, it's the people that you don't see who's making the majority impact. Like someone signing that person's check for them to be on the screen. And so I was very interested in that. My father, being who he was as far as entrepreneurship and community enfranchisement, and my mom especially, she always wanted me to realize to think beyond what I may see. Only seeing things on the screen is only scratching the surface. So go beyond that. And so I feel as though being involved with ownership of sports franchise allowed me to ultimately, bring that full circle moment to the field of sports. And then second thing too, I'm really interested in technology. When it comes to tech and medicine, that is a new frontier, but a very promising frontier. And so I feel myself, yes, I would love to, be in the operating room and operating on patients, but also I want my overall impact on medicine to be beyond the four corners of an operating room. And so as I continue to mature and also advance in that medical space, I want to get into tech and medicine. And then lastly, freedom, to be quite frankly with you. We realize as we get older, our community, as much as free as it can become, is also a cage. And sometimes we got to take a step out that cage to really see what life is about. And so one of my biggest goals is, as I continue to advance in all aspects of my life, that I can somewhat, release that door of certain people's cages so that they can continue to go beyond and dream beyond and ultimately fulfill what they want to become. And I hope that my interaction with you all today, and as I continue living my life, that I can be that beacon of hope and that reminder that you can accomplish so much more than what you can think or possibly believe by just being free and being open to change. And so that's my story. That's my process. And that's what I'm trying to do. Now, the process of medicine. Okay. So there are many careers in medicine. You can be a physician assistant. You can be a nurse. You can be a doctor. You can be a radiology tech. You can be number of different things, but specifically when it comes to being a doctor, this is the process of being a doctor. So ultimately, you have 4 years of college or university. You can major in absolutely anything. Don't let anyone tell you got to be a science major to be a doctor. At this time, there are certain classes that you must take in order to get into medical school. Yes, but you can be a philosophy major, you can be a sociology major, you can major in basket weaving. It doesn't matter what you majored in, but as long as you do well in your prerequisites for medical school, then you can get into medical school and also do well on your MCAT. So, you do your 4 years of college, you get your bachelor's degree, and also you have to take this thing called a medical college admissions test, which is called the MCAT, the MCAT. And there's I believe, a 6 to 8 hour exam, if I can remember, where it's basically it's like your standard SAT or your ACT for high school. We have the medical school version, which is the MCAT. And it's basically a several hour, 4 to 5 hour or 6 hour exam where you take questions and you got to read prompts and read stories and you got to answer them correctly, of course, and get a certain score. And I think at this time, any score above 500 or greater is considered a good score. So you do your 4 years of college, you take your MCAT, and then you get into medical school. And medical school is 4 or 5 years, depending on what type of program you want to get into. Certain programs are longer because they may also offer like a JD or a lawyer degree, or even a master's in public health, or even a master's in business administration. Some medical schools do offer other degrees in addition to the MD degree. And so you do that time. And then during usually your last year of your medical school tenure or your medical school sort of process, you apply for residency. Okay. Now, residency is when you are a doctor and you basically are training under the specialty you want to get into. Okay. Now, all of your non-surgical specialties are more about 3 years, but your surgical specialties can range between 4 to 7 years. I believe at this time, neurosurgery is 7 years. Me being an orthopedic surgeon, my residency is 5 years, and I'm in my 3rd year of my 5th year residency program. And specifically when it comes to, like family medicine or pediatrics, a lot of those non-surgical specialties are only 3 years. So that's kind of the situation. Now, when you are a training resident, you do get paid, okay? And how much you get paid is depending upon the area that you live in. So if you live in New York, where the cost of living is higher, you will get paid higher to ultimately make up for those expenses. And that's how that is generally paid. And usually a resident can make anywhere from between $65,000 to about $75,000 to even $80,000 a year, depending on where you live. Okay. So that's kind of the makeup. Now, student loans. Okay. There are a lot of great opportunities available for your medical school tuition to be paid upon, but yet that's depending upon making sure you have good grades, right? Making sure that you are heavily involved in your community, okay? Because you can't just be smart. You have to be, community driven, and also be able to connect with people. And so if you are a well-rounded applicant, you do well, you know how to talk with people, there are many opportunities for you to get your medical school tuition paid for, okay? And that's definitely a possibility. Medical school is not cheap, okay? At my medical school, my tuition was about $85,000 a year, and which the majority, I did have scholarships that took care of some of that, but once I finished my training, I will have to pay those loans back. On average, that's me being real with you guys, the medical student graduates with about $250,000 to about $300,000 in debt, okay? Now, medical school or school loans is a different type of debt than credit card loans, okay? So, medical school loans is it could be seen as a huge opportunity to establish credit, okay? And so long as you are current with your payments, you don't wild out with some credit card bills, that'll be a huge opportunity for you to, put money down every month to generate your credit history and to move on from that. Also, additionally, for those med students who are involved in finances, want to, improve that, financial literacy is extremely important. It is extremely important. Making sure that you guys have a savings account, make sure you guys have a checking account, and also learning how to invest. There are things that you guys must be learning now so that when that time comes, you can take advantage of that, okay? Now, when it comes to salary, what's the average doctor's salary? Now, the salary is all depending upon whether you are surgical or you're non-surgical. Okay. Surgeons do get paid more because there's more risk involved. Okay. Someone's under anesthesia, you're cutting someone open. There's more risk involved with a surgical operation than someone who's just handing out prescriptions. Not saying that there's no risk involved with handing out prescriptions, is that there's a lot more at stake when it comes to surgicals or surgeons. So their sort of salaries are sometimes, majority of the time, a lot more higher than those who are non-surgical doctors. So on average, your general practitioner can make anywhere from average about $250,000 to about $300,000 a year. Now, if you own your own practice, that can definitely increase. You have a lot of, pediatricians or family medicine doctors or internal medicine doctors who are pretty much making $500,000 a year based off, they may have other clinics. They may be involved with devices. They may be involved with intellectual property and may ultimately increase their overall earning potential. Now, when it comes to, surgical salaries, it could range. I've heard, one not spine surgeon, but one joint replacement specialist, someone who basically replaces hip and knees, can make up to about $20 million a year, but he's not taking any insurance. He's taking straight cash from hip replacements. And so you got to have a certain sort of population demographic who is willing to give you just $15,000, $20,000 per joint, right? But majority on average of all, I guess, orthopedic surgeons can make anywhere from about 600 to about close to about 7 million, not 7 million, but over $1 million a year, depending on what specialty you want to get into. Okay. Now, if you have intellectual property and you invent things, your salary will increase. But on average, your average surgeon, if it would be a trauma surgeon or anything like that, can make close to about $500,000 a year. Okay. So which is definitely, more than the base average salary of the typical, American household. So I still have to say, you will be able to take care of yourself and your family for years to come.
And I do think that's a really important point because oftentimes students are overwhelmed by the fact that it's 8 years of schooling, right? That feels like a really long time to figure
Yes.
out how to afford 8 years of schooling. And then the level of debt you take on is really scary to see that price
Mm-hmm.
tag. But when you consider the salary that you can make once you get there, you can pay off that debt very, very quickly if you would like to,
Yes.
because you're making enough money to pay it off in a year or 2 years
Right.
potentially, because that's a really good quality of life. And so, considering that it seems overwhelming, but it is in fact doable when that is sort of the end that you can get to.
Yeah, you're right. You're exactly right. And so, in conclusion, I learned this rule back when I was in high school, and it's called the 90-10 rule. Okay. 10% of your life is when life hits you. The other 90% is how you respond. Now, reflecting that sort of, saying back in my own life, when my father passed away, yet it was my whole world, it was still only 10% of my life. And I knew that in order for me to really push things forward and to ultimately maximize and carry on the legacy that he has built, I had to transition to that 90% rule where, yes, my father passed away, it's only now me and my mother, my family is out of whack. So how do I ultimately make the best of the situation? Is one, understanding that I have executive control over my life, understanding that, yes, life may feel crummy. Life may feel hard. And in certain circumstances, it really is. And there comes a time where you got to make that decision upon yourself that say, you know what? Yes, this did happen, but this is how I will respond. And I'm going to respond with intent. I'm going to respond with purpose so that that 10% does not ruin my 90. So for instance, if you're in high school, you got a bad grade, that's 10% of your life. You're in high school, you have family members who are, going through different situations. Yes, that's 10% of your life. You have, you say, oh, this teacher's getting on my nerves. I can't stand this man or woman, that's 10% of your life. You may come home to have food to eat. Yes, that's 10% of your life. but also understand that there are people out here who are willing to support you. There are organizations, a lot of people who want to see you succeed, but it all starts with making the decision. And that decision is, do you want better? And if you respond with intent, you respond with positivity, and you have anyone who is willing to help you see you through the way, you will then gain more executive control of your life, where as you continue to move on, that 10 becomes 9. Now it's 9 and 91. That 10 then becomes 5. Now it's 5 and 95. And so when the majority of your life is how you respond and how you be proactive as far as life events and continue things forward, that ceiling gets higher and higher and higher for you. So that's what this is all about. And I hope that you guys can take this and learn something from it and continue that legacy that we all trying to build upon. And then lastly, people buy into why you do things, not what you do. Okay. And that's really important because the company that I can think of when I see this statement is Apple, right? The reason Apple is so great at what they do versus, no disrespect to any Android users, but or PC type of organizations, Apple has done a good job of basically infiltrating why you need this, right? So like if you're on TV and you see a product and they say, this is the best phone ever, and they show you all the specifics, an Apple commercial will show someone walking down the street, they pull out the little Apple phone, they start, making appointments or like playing music, only to show you that their product is what allows you to carry through life. It's a total different example than a company just showing their phone and showing how great it is versus another company that say, you know what, I'm going to show you how using our product will make your life simpler. That's what Apple does. They do it amazingly well. And guess what? We eat on it. Every 6 months, every 12 months, we buy a new phone, right? And that's why Apple has done such a great job, because they show you why our product is great, not what it is. And certain circumstances, depending on who you want to talk about, Apple phones may not even be that much bigger than the Android or better than the Android yet. But when it comes to marketing their product, they show you why it is essential to your everyday life. So it's not about it's not about what you do, it's about why you do it. And I think that, as we go beyond the scope of product, people will invest in your life once they understand your purpose. And once you are able to communicate your purpose and share why you want to do things, people will go above and beyond to make sure that you can accomplish that and see it through. And that's basically what this is all about. I hope you guys understood what I'm saying. And I hope that you guys can take something from this. So now lastly, we are hosting, with the help of Ms. Beth and also Prep KC, we are inviting high school students to come to University Health and learn about orthopedic surgery and how to be a surgeon. And it's a free event. We have great food, great workshops where you'll be able to not only break bones, but also learn how to fix them. You will also be provided lectures and interactive sessions on the field of orthopedic surgery, and hope that you will ultimately become an orthopedic surgeon yourself and be interested in the field. It is on November 4th, I believe it is on a Saturday, between 8:30 a.m. and 2:30 p.m. is at our surgical center here on campus. And by scanning this code, you can scan there and put in your information to register. You can also reach out to Ms. Beth McCarthy, who is here, who will definitely give you more information if you still need to. Okay. Thank you guys for your time. I really do appreciate it. And you guys have a blessing.
Awesome. Well, Kenneth, I so appreciate your time. And I think the power of your message for students and just the opportunity to connect with you and to hear how you approach life and persisted through, and regardless of what was thrown your way, you are an impressive individual that students will really benefit an amazing amount from getting to connect with you, and lots of other people on your team that will be there on November 4th. So appreciate your time today.
No problem. No problem.